Hi, I'm Ellie and this is part of the Craft House Magic tutorial series. Today I'm going to show you how to do the first square of your Cosy Memories blanket. The style I like to use has this sort of a knit diagonal stitch right the way through the middle. I really like this style because it allows you to have a sort of diagonal ridge all the way across your blanket. There are some patterns that don't have this ridge. I know that Kemper Ray has a pattern that doesn't have this ridge on Ravelry if you're interested in that. But I'm going to show you how I do mine. So to start with, you'll need 5 grams of fingering or 4-ply weight yarn. It can be any sort of material you want your blanket to be made out of. I tend to do a mixture of sort of merino and traditional sock yarns and some silks as well, so I like to mix it up. You also need obviously some needles. These are 2.75mm needles. They're Knit Pro Zings, 15 centimeters in length. I also add some point protectors, which are from Clover. I shall show you where they're from. I think I picked these up on Amazon just for a few pounds. They're really handy just because it stops your stitches from falling off the end, because you're going to cast on quite a few stitches to start with. The usual scissors and darning needle will be helpful just so that you can sew your ends in, and sometimes I find it useful to have a progress keeper as well to mark the wrong side of your work so you know when to do your decreases. So I use a long tail cast on to start with. So I take about 90 centimeters of yarn because I'm going to cast on about 49 stitches, and then I create a slip knot. There we go. So I pop that on the needle and just tension it nicely. So if you haven't done a long tail cast on before, I've taken the wool that's from the cut end of the yarn and I've put it around my thumb. And then the one that's leading to the ball, I put it around my finger and then run both yarns into the palm of my hand. I then scoop yarn from the front of the thumb and then take a loop of yarn through that loop and tension accordingly. So I'll keep doing that for a couple more stitches to show you. I just really like this method of casting on. Oops. If you do have a tension that's not quite correct, you can always take your stitch off and start it again. So I'm now going to cast on a total of 49 stitches. So I've got 49 stitches on the needle. First of all, I'm going to do 2 rows of just plain knit before you do any decreases or anything. So 2 rows of plain knit. There we have 2 rows of garter stitch, and now we turn it ready to do the 3rd row. Now this is going to be your wrong side, and you're going to be doing your reverse centre double decreases on every wrong side row. So it's a good idea to mark what your wrong side row is with a progress keeper. It's a little bit difficult to sort of mark at this stage because there aren't many stitches there, but at least you'll have some idea. Some people make sure that they mark their needles, like using these point protectors for instance, so I'd know that every time my stitches were on the needle with the blue-green stopper on, I'd know I'd need to do the centre double decrease, or reverse centre double decrease I should say. So first of all, because we've got 49 stitches on there, you need to knit 23 before you do the reverse centre double decrease. So I'm going to knit 23 stitches. So I've now got 23 stitches knitted on my 3rd row. So I put the yarn to the front of the work and I slip 2 stitches knitwise onto the right hand needle. Then I slip these stitches back onto the left hand needle purlwise so that I don't twist them, and then I take the right hand needle and put it into the back of the 2 stitches, difficult to show on camera, to the back of the 2 stitches and twist them and put them back onto the right needle, and then put the needle through the back of those 2 stitches, and you're basically twisting them right around, and then I purl the next stitch and slip those 2 stitches over the one I've just purled. Now you can slip those over one at a time or together if you can. So that's your reverse centre double decrease. It looks a little bit fiddly, but once you've got it in your head, it is not too bad at all. So then I'm going to keep knitting for the rest of that needle, for that row. So that's row 3 completed. I turn the work over and this is now a right side row. So as I said before, all the right side rows are basically just knit. So I'm going to knit row 4. So that's row 4 completed. So row 5 is a wrong side row. I can tell because my cat progress keeper is marking the wrong side. So row 5 is a wrong side row and I need to do a centre double decrease, a reverse centre double decrease. So because on row 3 I knitted 23, did the reverse centre double decrease and knitted another 23, I now knit 22 stitches and do the same thing. But I do find it easier just to look on the right side of the work and see where the centre double decrease knit stitches line, the knit stitch line is, and just knit to so that there's 1 stitch left to knit before that point. So I shall show you when I get there. As you can see, if you look at the right side of the work, I am 1 stitch away from the centre decrease line. So that those stitches there line up with this stitch, and there's 1 stitch ready to knit before that point. So that's, I've knitted 21 there, and on the next time you come to a wrong side row it'd be 20 stitches, but it is easier just to see where your centre decrease line is. So again, I put the yarn to the front of the work, slip 2 stitches, slip them back purlwise, and then put the needle into the back of those 2 stitches and slip them to the right hand needle. Purl the next stitch, put the yarn to the back of the work, and then slip those 2 stitches over the one you've just purled. Now it's a good idea to keep a good tension when you've just put those stitches over the back of that stitch, just to keep it nice and tight. If you don't do this, sometimes you end up with a wavy centre line. So now I need to just knit till the end of the row and keep repeating what I've just done, but knitting 1 stitch less before I get to the centre on each time. So you're reducing 2 stitches every time you do a reverse centre double decrease. This way you will work across the square and you will get less and less stitches on your needles. So I'll show you that one more time. I'm back on the front of the work, so I'm going to do a knit row. And you can see that ridge is starting to form in the centre there. So I turn it over to the wrong side, and my progress keeper, I can move it up a little bit just so that I can more easily see which is the wrong side as you keep knitting. So I shall show you the reverse centre double decrease again. If you put your progress keeper right in the middle, you'll be able to tell more or less where your centre decrease stitch is. So you can see my centre stitch is here, and I've just left 1 stitch next to that to do the centre double decrease. I've put my yarn to the front of the work. I'm then going to slip 2 stitches knitwise onto the right needle. Then I slip them back to the left needle purlwise, so you're not twisting them the second time. Then you put your needle behind those 2 stitches, like as if you're going to purl them through the back loop, but you're not going to purl them, you're just going to move them to the right hand needle. So you've really twisted them then. Then you do a purl, put the yarn to the back of the work and slip those 2 stitches over that purl stitch that you've made. So it's as simple as that. And then I'm going to continue knitting to the end of the row. So then, because we've got a right side row, it's all knit, and then the wrong side row I do the same thing again, knit just before the centre decrease line, and then do the reverse centre double decrease again. It sounds a bit of a mouthful, but please don't be scared to try it. Once you've got the hang of it, it's quite easy. I will carry on with my square until I'm almost at the end. I've kept repeating those 2 rows until I've reduced down to 3 stitches. So you've been knitting backwards and forwards here to make a square shape, and by decreasing either side of this centre point it makes a nice square. So I'll show you how I did the last decrease because it gets a little bit fiddlier. So I will bring the yarn to the front, slip 2 stitches knitwise, slip them back purlwise to the left needle, and then put the needle purlwise through the last 2 stitches at the same time and slip them back onto the right hand needle. Purl the last stitch, put the yarn to the back of the work, and then carefully slip the last 2 stitches over the purled stitch, so you've only got 1 stitch on the needles. So what I tend to do is just make my stitch really big, snip the yarn with a little bit of excess, oops, and pop the yarn through that loop. I find it makes a neater edge than just pulling your end through that loop like I would normally when knitting other things. So you can see the back of the work, you've got like a groove, and on the front of the work you've got this line of knit stitches. So you'll see that quite often this end seems a little bit pointier than the other corners, but that's fine. Once you've knitted the other squares around it, it'll square it up nicely, and if any areas are a little bit uneven, that'll square up as well when you knit additional squares. So I'll just show you how I sew my ends in. I'm just going to remove my progress keeper, which I've kept on the back of the work just so I know when I need to do my centre double decrease. So I've got 2 ends to sew in. I'm just going to thread my needle. Sometimes it's easier to use one of those plastic needles with a larger eye. But basically what I do is thread my needle, that's it, through 3 stitches diagonally on the purl bumps, and then come down 3 stitches diagonally and go up 3 stitches diagonally, and then that sort of disappears, you can't see it, and then I'll just go back where I've just come from, but missing the last stitch I've gone through, so it kind of ties the thread in, and I'll just go up a little diagonal again, and then I'll just snip the yarn and I'll always do my weaving in on the wrong side of the work, just in case it shows a little bit. I think you can just about see where I've sewn the ends in, but it's practically invisible. And then I do the same with the end that I've just cast off. Oops. So with the wrong side of the work facing, I'll just try and thread the needle through this end bit that's become a little bit pointy. It's not as easy to get it as neat through the stitches as it is the other end, but I just turn it over and make sure that I've got a reasonable corner there, and then weave diagonally as I did before. Through the work. Sometimes it's difficult to kind of get a really good diagonal when you're coming from the corner, but as long as you go in a few times and then go back on yourself a couple of times, that should hold it. Sorry about me knocking the camera. So there we are. I'm just going to snip that end off, and you have a finished square. So it's nice and squishy, and you could even use these as coasters, I suppose. I'm not quite sure if they're big enough. You could make a group of 4. So the second tutorial, which will follow on after this, will show how you can add squares around this first square. So thanks for watching.